Hello again, everybody, and welcome to the Racing Writers Podcast. I'm your host, Kelly Crandall. First thing I want to do on this week's episode is thank everyone for the continued feedback, the ratings, reviews, and everything that has been posted on social media. I have been seeing those, and I'm greatly humbled and appreciative that everything so far has been positive when it comes to the Racing Writers Podcast and what I've been doing here the last couple weeks. So that is great to see and makes me definitely want to keep going. It's been a fun journey. Especially last week, we had a very long episode, I think it was over 2 hours, with myself and Matt Weaver, which is, as we talked about, normally how our conversations go, and it sounded like everybody went right through to the end and really enjoyed our conversation. We, of course, covered a lot about Phoenix, or looking ahead to Phoenix, looking back at Texas, and even looking ahead to this week, which is Homestead Week, Championship Weekend. Very excited to fly down there in a little bit, actually, after I get this episode posted. So go back and listen to last week's episode if you want to know kind of where I stand on how Championship Weekend stacks up. We've got a lot to watch, of course, between crowning 3 champions in all 3 series. We even have rivalry watch still with Denny Hamlin and Chase Elliott. And in the truck series, we've got Austin Cindric, who's going to be competing for the championship, but he's got to watch his back because ThorSport Racing is not very happy with him. So that, I think, might be the race to watch this weekend, because even a few days later, it sounds like that group is still very, very upset. But let's get to this week's show. Tony Gibson needs no introduction. He's the current crew chief for Kurt Busch and the number 41 Stewart-Haas Racing team. If you guys don't like this episode, then I really have nothing for you. Tony and I feel like I say this every week, but Tony and I went in depth on just about everything under the sun, because Tony Gibson has been around this business for a very long time, and I wanted to pick his brain about different roles he's been in, different drivers he's worked with, different teams he's been with, and just how the sport has changed since he first started. You'll hear him talk about how he's had to adapt to that. You're also going to hear him talk about this season with Kurt Busch. Of course, they came out, won the Daytona 500, and things just have not gone according to plan after winning the biggest race of the year. So you're going to hear about that. Of course, highlights from Tony Gibson's career. But what I think you're really going to enjoy, because I did, was listening to Tony talk about Kurt Busch, the driver and the person. He's worked with Kurt, and he's known Kurt now for a couple years, and you're going to hear him talk about how competitive Kurt is, but also kind of how he gets a bad rap for that, which is actually a question I point blank asked him, if people misunderstand who Kurt Busch is. So that was really interesting. It was also fascinating to listen to him talk about how, as a crew chief, you have to change your style, of course, depending on what driver you are working with. For instance, a Danica Patrick, who he worked with when she first started her Cup career, needed a little bit more coaching. And sometimes, Tony Old Man, as he's known, came off a little gruff. So you're actually going to hear what happened with Danica during some of their meetings. You're also going to hear him talk about how Dale Earnhardt Jr. was receptive to feedback, which, spoiler alert, was not very good. And, something else that I really got wrapped up in, and I really think a lot of you are going to be interested in, especially on the heels of Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s final start this weekend, is Tony Gibson talks about DEI. Remember, Tony was over there during the early 2000s, right up until he joined Stewart-Haas Racing in about 2008, and you're going to hear Tony talk, and really you're gonna sense how his mood changed a little bit, not in a bad way, but it was a sad topic for him, a very regretful tone, in the sense of, how did this happen to DEI? And he's going to talk about all the good things that they had going on over there. And I was actually fascinated to hear how Tony and a few of his team members that he actually is still working with today got to go back to DEI a couple years ago to get some of their belongings, and it really sounded like that was an emotional trip, so you're going to hear that as well. So I really enjoyed spending time with Tony Gibson. There was plenty of interesting stuff here. This episode was recorded last week, the week going into Phoenix, which is actually the day that Eric Almirola was introduced at Stewart-Haas as the next driver of the number 10 Ford. So we sat in Tony Gibson's office as Eric and everybody down in the shop was going through the motions of doing interviews and Facebook Live stuff. I'm sure fans of SHR saw that. They were all in over there at Stewart-Haas, which again, if you go back and listen to last week's episode, you'll hear myself and Matt Weaver break down that whole event from last week, from last Wednesday, I believe it was. So remember, please keep rating, reviewing, spreading the love on social media. I do see it. It is very much appreciated. And again, I'm enjoying this adventure hopefully as much as everybody else is. So let's get to this week's episode with Tony Gibson.
All right, here with Tony Gibson. And Tony, it's I'm glad we got to do this today because it's an exciting time down in the shop. Eric Almirola was down there. Were you down there to see him get introduced? It seemed like it was a mighty good time down there. Everybody seemed happy.
Yeah, it's a great day for Stewart-Haas. You know, we coming off a really good weekend of, the 41 sitting on the pole and setting a track record and a speed record, and then the 4-car winning the race and transferring into the Final Four, and then announcing Smithfield and Eric coming to drive the 10-car next year. It's just it's been a great few days for our company, and all the guys on the floor and all the people that have a hand in building race cars and holding up this company, it means a lot to them, and it just shows that everybody here upstairs is working on sponsorship and getting good drivers in here and good companies to back us so we can all have jobs. So yeah, it was a great day.
And with the 41 team, you mentioned it, you guys are coming off of the fastest lap at 1.5 miles, a track record at Texas, and that team was pumped up on Friday. There was a lot of high fives and smiles. And
yeah, we have,
And it was your birthday?
Yeah, it was my birthday, so that was good. But yeah, we've had fast cars all year, and we've just had horrible luck. We have had, ever since Daytona, it's just we've had, be in contention to win or top 5, and just had things happen. And Sunday was no different. We're running in the top 3, top 4 all day, and a fast car, and then we have a lug nut get stuck between the wheel and the hub on a green flag stop, and we have to pit again and go a lap down, and we get the lap back, and we get back to 9th, and we just run out of time, but it's like, it just seems like it never ends, like we can never catch that break to this year to make things turn around. But we don't stop working hard. Obviously, we build fast cars, and so when things like that happen, you grab onto any little thing of positive that you can and feed off of it. And so, it was an exciting day for us. And like I said, to not only just sit on the pole, but to set a new track record and to set a speed record at 1.5 miles that probably won't be broken for a while with the aero stuff that's coming down the road with NASCAR. But so everybody's proud of that.
You mentioned the bad luck, and that's kind of really what I wanted to get into is, after you guys won the Daytona 500, I guess a lot of people would have looked at it like that's a great launching pad to go into the season. And like you said, it just seems like it's been one thing after another.
Mm-hmm.
You have fast cars, but when you really kind of break down your numbers, it's like, man, they only 16 laps led up until this point. So how do you, aside from the bad luck, kind of how do you break down this season in terms of how it's gone for the 41 team? You made the playoffs, which is great, but then you get eliminated in the first round. Has it just been more of a bad luck type thing?
Well, it has been, but we had a lot of speed going into the chase. We were coming off consecutive top 5s and a lot of momentum, and we were running 5th at Chicago last pit stop, and we got a speeding penalty on pit road and kind of ruined our day. The last pit stop, there's no way you're going to make that up. So that put us in a little bit of a hole to start, and then we go to Loudon, and the 4-car spins out and we T-bone him. When you 2 team cars wreck you, it's like, so now we're in a definite, we're still in a reachable getting in on points, transferring, and we go to Dover, and we were running 8th and doing things like we need to do and be solid, and he missed the commitment cone to get on pit road, and we went 2 laps down under green and just never could make it up. So there was some bad luck that went along with it, with loose wheels and flats and wrecks that we had no idea where we were going to get hit from behind. And But there were some mental mistakes that we made too. A lot of pit road stuff that just bit us too. So, some of it's bad luck, and then some of it's just stuff that we made bad decisions and made mistakes. So, in this point system, the way it is in this chase format, you just can't afford a bad race. You get one bad race, and it's really, really hard to come out of it.
So I kind of feel like in that regard that the team's numbers this year are almost a little bit deceiving, because you can keep going back to that, well, we've had speed and we've just had, lug nuts here and speeding penalties there. So when you break all that down, do you kind of look at this year like, man, if we had just had this race go this way, or are there races that stick out to you in the sense of, I wish we could have that back?
Yeah, like I said, even one of the 3 first chase races, just give us an average finish of 12th or 15th, and we survive it, but we just could not do that. I'd love to have like at Kentucky, we broke a gear. We had a seal go out like the 48 had a couple years ago, knocked him out of the chase. That was a good day where we were going to get some bonus points, and that would have maybe carried us a little further and made up for the mistakes we had. But times we had the chance to may have bonus points, again, something's happened that we would have to pit early before we were able to get to the end of the stage, or something's just gone awry. That's there's several races, but the biggest one I think would be Kentucky. That really hurt us. We had a really good car there, and we had a chance to get some stage points, and that things like that really hurt you. You look at 10 or 15 points at one racetrack, tag those on to what you lost at Loudon. Now you're back in the game again, and you don't have to go to Dover, and you can finish 20th and still make it in. So that race was bad. But like I said, there's so many other teams have had the same problem, and they can look back and say the same thing.
Absolutely.
So it's fair across the board, and we have to do a better job executing and taking the mental mistakes away. Luck is what it is. We can't change that, but the things that we can change, we need to work on and get better on.
Kurt and even Kevin has talked a little bit this year about, in the early part of the season, one of the toughest things was just trying to find a balance with these cars, the switch over to Ford and adjusting to life under Ford and new cars and new engines and all this. It's a different feel. And Kurt had mentioned a few times, if we can just nail down the balance and what I'm feeling, then we can really start getting a direction.
Yep.
How hard has that been, in a sense, to, not only are you working to adjust and you're working to get over a bad luck, but your driver is also like, man, we're still not there yet, I'm still not feeling it.
Yeah, I don't think, and I think you go through the whole year, every year I think we sat down and said, man, we just really still don't have a grasp on the total package of it. And I don't know that anybody out there can say that, maybe the 78, but everybody else I think has struggled, and none of these cars drive good, and they're not going to drive good. And the aero balance that we fight, going to Ford, was an aero shift to the front, which was a lot for us to absorb. Not only just the body, or manufacturer body, but the NASCAR rules that came along. They got way stricter. They took some more downforce off these cars. The inspection at the racetrack got tougher, and that took another chunk of downforce off. So not only did we fight changing to Ford as a manufacturer, just the body offset, it was the NASCAR stuff that we didn't expect either. So that took another big chunk on it. So that's the part I think they're talking about, is just they're so hard to drive. These cars are just, there's no downforce on them. The tires are extremely hard. So I don't know that you're ever going to find a balance that they're going to be happy with. I mean, we ran second at Kansas a couple weeks ago, and you'd thought it was terrible. It's like, Harvick won the other day and said, man, it was just all over the place. But I just had to change the way I drove my race car. I got to find a way to move it around and do something different to make a difference because they just drive so bad. You're looking for that one little thing that'll make you, a tenth better than the next guy, whether it's moving your car around a different line, driving it different, using more brake, less brake, those are the things that make the bigger difference now than we can do with the cars, because they're so far off aero-wise.
So a happy moment was, of course, winning the Daytona 500, not only the biggest race of the year, but you are a Daytona Beach boy, and obviously your reaction once it finally sunk in, it took a minute.
Yeah, I didn't really see it cross the line, because Stewart was standing up and Johnny was standing up and everybody was standing up, and I couldn't see the car coming off before, so I had no idea, kind of where we were.
Right.
Until actually it got over with, and then I saw the car come by and Stewart's jumping up and down, and then I just realized we just won the Daytona 500. So yeah, it was a little bit of delay there.
But your reaction?
Yeah, it's like, holy crap! Did this just happen? I've been fortunate enough to win the Daytona 500 as a car chief before, and it's, don't get me wrong, it's exciting and it means a lot. But to win it as a crew chief, growing up as a kid in Daytona, that was the very first track I ever went to, and my mom worked there for 27 years, and just being a part of it for so long as a kid, and knowing that's what I want to do. One day I want to be in that position at that racetrack to win that race. That's when it hits you.
Yeah.
That's when everything, I've made it. This is what I've been doing all my life. This is what I wanted to do. All the stuff I went through as a kid, and the local short track stuff, and my dad working 2 jobs, and this right here is just all the emotion poured out of 31 years of me doing this.
So it's safe to say you've never felt a joy like that, which I think is what came out and why everybody was like, man, look at that's what winning the Daytona 500 is about.
Yes, that's exactly right. I love winning all of them. Don't get me wrong, but to win, and I've been fortunate enough to win some championships, but that particular race is so hard to win. There's not that many. There's only like 39 different winners, maybe 40 now with Kurt, of that race. And you look back at like Dale Sr., how hard he tried, and he finally won it one time. To be a guy who's won the championship 7 times and only won that race one time. It's just such a hard one to win. So many things can go wrong. So many things can go right. Being in the right place, the right time, having the right partner, the pusher, everything just has to line up. And at the end of the day, it happened, and it may not ever happen again. Your opportunity came, you seized it, and here it is in front of you.
So Kevin had me laughing last night when he was doing his show on Sirius XM, because he started talking, I forget how they got on the topic, but they started talking about you, and he mentioned how you are, he says, the biggest cheerleader when it comes to Stewart-Haas in general. He said there is nothing like seeing Tony Gibson get excited about whether it's race wins, even if it's not the 41 team.
Yeah.
But he said there's nothing like the emotion and the excitement that comes out of a Tony Gibson. They called you like a big grizzly bear.
Yeah.
Is that true? I mean.
Yeah, I was. I always go up to all our teammates' cars before the race and tell them good luck and go win this thing, and because I want if any of us win, we win as a company. And Harvick, I went to his car before the race, and I pointed number 1. I said, today's your day. So yeah, after the race was over with, he's coming down pit road and he sees me, he swerves over, and I was pretty excited for him, man, because he's worked really hard, and he's a great driver, he's a great ambassador for our sport, he's a great champion, and I was so happy for him that he told me on Monday when he come in here, he said, dude, I thought you were going to have a heart attack. I'm like, man, I'm just so excited for you. I'm proud of you. I'm excited for you. I'm excited for our company.
Yep.
It's just the way I am. It doesn't have to be the 41. It could be any of our teams. That's how happy I am for our guys.
Yeah, and that was his point. He said you just are the biggest cheerleader.
Yeah.
And it's just very entertaining for him to see how excited you get.
Yeah, I try to. I try to keep everybody pumped up and headed in the right direction. And it's like I said, we're a team. We're a company. So when one wins, we all win. And I tell everybody every day that the only way we're going to get better is to get better together. So whether it's laughing or crying or helping one another or rooting for the other guy, that's what we're here to do.
So your driver, you've worked with Kurt now for 2 full seasons. You started at the end of what
14.
Was it? 14, yes. What have you learned about Kurt? I mean, he has a good reputation, some good, some bad. Everybody knows his talent and things like that. But what have you, working closely with him, what are some of the things that you've seen from a Kurt Busch?
You know, the passion to win, I've seen that in a few drivers, and I see it in his brother. I've never worked with him, but I see it in Kyle as well. Is second's not good enough, which that's what you want as a crew chief. You want a driver that is not happy with second place, and like we talked about earlier, it's the car. Man, I won the race, or I ran second, or run third. The car was horrible. It drove bad. You want a guy with that criticism to make you better and make you try harder. And that's one thing that Kurt has done was he's kept this team driving forward. He yells and screams, and some things it's not fun to hear. But at the end of the day, he goes out there and gives you everything he has every lap. And there's no other driver that I'd want to drive for than a guy who goes out there and you never have to second guess, man, is he going to give me 80% today or 50% or,
right.
That's not Kurt Busch. He gives you everything he has every lap on the racetrack.
Do you think that he is misunderstood in that sense?
I do. I think it's a lot like Alan Quiggy. I worked for Alan for a long time, and a lot of people just really didn't understand Alan and didn't know the other side of him. And I've been fortunate enough to see that other side of Kurt. We've been hunting together, and we do a lot of things. Him and my wife Beth and Ashley, we've gone out to eat together. We've done a lot of fun things together. Personally, he is. When I had my appendix yanked out last year, he flew. I had it done on Wednesday. He picked me up Friday morning and had his plane fly me to the racetrack. Me and my wife to the racetrack. My grandmother passed away this year. He had his plane come, pick me up, take me down there, and then fly me straight back to the racetrack. He will do anything for anybody. He's the most kind-hearted person I have ever met. And these are some of the things that people don't understand about Kurt Busch. And I think where they get some of the bad things people think about Kurt is some of the things he says on the radio, and his passion comes out different than a lot of people do. Some people can harness it up and they hide it till later on, and they'll go and kick a door later or do something. He's a guy that trapped inside this race car, then he only has one way out to vent, and that's push that button. And I've always told him, I'm the guy that accept that. I'll take it. Just don't make it personal to us. That's all I ask. But I just think he's just gone through so much in his life, and it's a kid that grew up driving his own cars and working with his dad and his brother, and I just think it's nobody understands till you're in that position of what it feels like.
Right.
There's football players, baseball players that have gone through the same thing, and the fans really don't. Darrell Waltrip was the same way, right? They either hate him or you like him. But at the end of the day, they're successful, and so that's you can't fault a guy for that. But his desire to win and to be the best is by far to none. Nobody's going to touch it.
And yet, for even as competitive as he is, one of the things I found interesting, you mentioned the Kansas race where you did finish second, but he had made the comment afterwards, he credited you with that because he said you got on him after qualifying because of something he wasn't doing. I think he referenced the brakes.
Yeah.
So even for somebody who is as competitive and as successful as Kurt Busch, there are still times where you need to get on your driver.
Yeah, we've been, and I accept it the other way too. I've made bad mistakes, but it was just going over some data, and I just it's not always the car's fault. Sometimes you can change the way you drive and help yourself. So yeah, we got into it a little bit, and I'm over it in 5 minutes, and we're gone, and I don't know. Zippy told me I should do that every week because it fired him up, and he went out and drove the hell out of it, and
that's what he said. It was very motivating.
It was motivating. So, but I don't think my heart can go through all that. I'll have a stroke if I have to go through too many closed door meetings like that in the trailer. So, but we're great friends, and we respect one another, and like I told him afterwards, and we still joke about it. He made some jokes after qualifying, about the brakes, using the brakes. And I'm like, man, I can take it. But you got to be that way. You have to be able to sit down and be vocal about it and take the criticism either way, whether it's me, him, or whichever. And then you walk out and you go outside and you perform. That's what we're paid to do, and that's none of us are perfect, including these drivers.
I'm curious, Tony, how have you had to change your style through the years? Because you have worked with many different drivers, you've been in different roles, you've worked with drivers like a Bill Elliott, an Alan Kawicki, a Jeff Gordon, you've been crew chiefs for a Kurt Busch, a Ryan Newman, a Danica Patrick. How have you had to change? Like we just talked about, there's some things where sometimes you have to know to get up on your driver, sometimes you have to let them vent, but in terms of what your kind of typical style is as a crew chief, have you had to change that much through the years to adjust to each driver?
Some you have to change. I mean, Danica was just coming in and learning, and so the way that I addressed her growth and where she needed to be and how aggressive I am, that changed. Crew chiefing from Mark Martin was totally different. He was a totally different kind of driver than anybody I've been around before. Kurt's definitely different. Michael Waltrip was different. There's so many different drivers that I've crew chief for. Dale Jr. was totally different. I filled in for Tony Jr. for 12 weeks, and even though I'd car chief for him, but when you're crew chiefing, it's a different. The way you have to talk different things. You're in a different level, so your talks are different, and then the way you approach things. So. Learning what buttons you can push with these drivers, that's the biggest thing you have to change. Some of them are, like Danica was like, I didn't want to ever make her cry, but I did a couple times, and I felt bad about it. So I had to learn how to change things up a little bit, how I sit down and explain and go over things. I just had to change my approach, you know what I mean? And then some drivers will just, like Dale Jr., he'll just get up and walk out. I mean, he's like a 5-year-old. So it's like all these drivers are just so different. I changed.
Right.
I was like a chameleon at this point. I was like, whatever driver I'm with, I got to learn as quick as I can what buttons to push, what's their personality, and then just work around it, and what their skills are, and what their background, what kind of racing they come from. So yeah, it was a huge change for me.
Yeah.
Because I've been with a lot of different drivers. I was fortunate enough to do Dick Trickle, Lake Speed, and they're all different in their own little ways. But I'm the same guy. So, but I think that's helped me. Over the years, is just being with so many different drivers and so many different personalities. And I learned a lot from Ray Abraham. Being with Ray. Ray came over to Quickies there for a brief time, but I learned a lot from him, and then I ended up going back to work for Ray in '98 at Hendricks, and I continued to learn more about managing people and in this sport, the things you can do, and I learned a lot. I watched how he controlled Jeff and how that all went, and I learned everything I could to knowing where I wanted to be as a crew chief. So you either learn from those guys or you're going to probably fail. Whether they did things bad or good, you still need to learn.
So that's the driver side. What about from a sport perspective? What's been the biggest challenges of trying to keep up through the years?
I'd say that'd be the technology and the engineering side of things. I'm not an engineer by far. I mean, I can turn one on and look through all my stuff, but the rest of that stuff gets so confusing sometimes. But I think what I've done really well at, and I knew this was coming back when I did work at Allen, because I could see the engineering side of things coming through Allen and through Ray, that I knew that if I was ever going to be successful, that I would have to adapt. And so I've done the best I can at adapting, but I also have hired and surrounded myself with really good, smart people. Like I kind of looked at it a long time ago like a football team. The coach is the coach, but you have an offensive line coach and a defensive line coach, and you have a quarterback coach and a kicking coach, and you have an offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator. So you have to hire all these people to surround you, to hire and letting them maintenance all these other little problems here, and you just kind of oversee and manage it. And I knew the sport was going that way 20 years ago. I seen this coming.
Really?
Yes. And so I made sure that I surrounded myself with really, really smart people that that were really good at their job. Like this guy here, he's really good at simulation program. Hire the best guy you can. Okay, that's your deal. I'm going to lean on you. I'm going to feed off of you. And you hire these guys, and I've carried them with me through this over the past 15 years. I've carried most of these guys with me. And we have built this bond, and I've learned from each and every one of them. You know, the only way to be successful is surround yourself with people that are better than you and smarter than you, and that's what I've been able to do. And I've been really fortunate enough they've stayed with me, and we've stayed together as a core group. And then I learned those things that I didn't know before. I learned. I listened to them. Just because I'm their boss doesn't mean I can't learn something from them and listen to them, and I do. And I think they respect that. You know, when you sit down one-on-one and you're asking them questions about their job and how do I make myself better at your job, you know, it makes them feel proud. You know, like, you know what, he cares enough to where it's like, you know, he doesn't think he's above me. You know, he's actually going to let me do my job, and that's what I do. I let these guys do their job, and we feed off one another. And when, you know, Johnny wants to be a crew chief one day, and we've been together for a very long time. My setup guy's been here with me for 15 years, so. You know, we want to grow together, and I want to see those guys. I want to see a man bloom up and be successful. So, and they know I feel that way about them. And I learned a long time ago that it was going that way, so I adapted, and I think that's helped me in this sport because technology is through the roof right now. And if I was, you know, not willing to change and accept that the sport was going that direction, I'd have been gone a long time ago.
So you're not surprised about that, and you also mentioned, you know, let guys do their jobs, but you've also talked about how you still like to be hands-on, though.
Oh, I do.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I like working with my guys one-on-one, and whether it's with setup stuff or body builds or chassis builds or putting the cars together, I'm down there all the time with them. I'm on the floor. I'm not in this office very much. Anybody here will probably tell you that. But I like to be hands-on. Tony Eury Sr. told me a long time ago, don't ever lose touch with your race car. If you ever lose touch with your race car, he says, you're done. So I've been fortunate enough to work at Stewart-Haas, where Tony Stewart is. This is a crew chief-driven company. So we're a hands-on crew chiefs. Like, we go out on the floor, we can work on our cars, we can touch our bodies, we can do whatever we need to do that we think we need to make our car better. And that's the fun part of our racing here at Stewart-Haas is, you know, it's just not a cookie-cutter car that they spit out and hand it to us and say, hey, here, this is what you got to run. The crew chiefs we can decide different things, and we can sit in a group and come up with things that we want our common car if we want to, or we can take this model and do little things, little torques that we want to do to it ourselves. And you know, that's what I love about working here. Is I'm an old school guy. I like going down and putting the engine in the car or putting the rear end housing in the car, or going over there and, you know, helping the guys put the body on it. And those are the things I like and I love, and because it intrigues me. I love it. I don't ever want to sit in an office. I'm not that kind of guy. I'm not a shirt and tie type of guy. I told Stewart that when we met at Talladega when I first came here in 08. It's like, if, you know, I met in this bus, you know, I'm like, look, dude, this is me right here. My shirt was unplugged, and I was like, you know, I'm like, hey, this is me. I'm not a shirt tie guy. I don't dress up any more than this. So if you're looking for somebody different, then I'm not your guy. You're exactly what I'm looking for, because I'm like him, shirt tail out, rough around the edges, and I tell you what I think and go. So it's worked out good for me.
So a few more things for you, Tony. I know you talked to Nate Ryan on his podcast, which was very good, by the way. I enjoyed listening to that. And you talked, of course, about Alan Kawicki, who you worked with, and I don't want to go into the same type of stuff, but I am curious about Alan. How do you describe him to a younger generation who has heard of an Alan Kawicki but may not necessarily understand kind of what he accomplished and who he was?
Yeah, I think, and a lot of them don't know, young kids don't know, but, you know, to sum it up, Alan was a person and a racer that had a goal when he was a kid, and he no matter what, was going to reach that goal. It was the last thing he did. He never gave up, whether it was lack of money, lack of people, lack of support. Alan was always steady at his goal. And one thing he always taught me was to never give up, ever give up. And that's where the Underbird came, you know, the Mickey Mouse little Underbird was. Alan he would preach to us every race, never give up, no matter what happens today, never give up. And we had a lot of those trials during those several years with Alan, to where, you know, man, we're ever going to win a championship, or we're ever going to do this, or we're going to do that, you know. And Alan would always instill in our heads, we're going to do this, just don't give up, stick with me. And so that, I think, you know, that right there pertains to all these young kids out there that no matter what, or young racers or whatever it is, just don't quit. You have a goal, just run like hell until you achieve it, or you just can't run anymore. And that's the way Alan was. Alan was also a person that loved kids. I know people don't have no idea that Alan Kawicki loved kids, but Alan was, you could bring a kid in the room and he went from this hard ass to just, he would melt. I mean, It was unbelievable. It's kind of surprised me, you know, as I went through the years of knowing Alan, you know, it's like, dude, I said, do you ever want to have kids? Oh yeah, I want to have kids. I love kids. I just, you know, and I'm like, well, you got to get married before you can have kids. You do know this. Well, I don't know if I can get married. So I was like, really, man? So it's going to be a little hard to have. Oh, well, it's not. I guess you can, but he, you know, he would always talk to the kids about, you know, be the best you can be, no matter what. If it's in school, you know, he would talk to kids about school, where they're at, what their grades, blah, blah, blah. And he would always tell those kids, no matter what, just always stay in school, do your best, be your best, strive for your goals, never give up.
When you all won the championship, did you realize at the time, or do you have a greater appreciation now of how big of an accomplishment that was?
We knew then we had the least amount of people. Like when we went to the racetrack, we didn't have anybody back at the shop. We shut down, and everybody we worked on the cars, we were the pit crew, we were everything. And we knew what we were up against, you know. But I think when you go back and look at what Alan did and what we did as a team with the amount of dollars, was unbelievable, you know. We won that championship on, I think it was $1.2 million. Wow. Sponsorship. It was 1.2 or 1.4. And I think Earnhardt at that point in time had the largest one at like $4.8 million.
Talking about budgets.
Budgets.
Yeah.
So when you look at what we did with that and what, you know, who we beat with the budget that they had, it was unbelievable. And the resources, you know, the resources that we had were nothing like, you know, the big teams, the Junior Johnsons, the Richard Childress. We just didn't have it. You know, we were just some single guys over here that every time we would wreck, we would take the rims and bend the lips of the rims back up so we could run them again. Mm-hmm. You know, Alan would just make us, you know, we would take lug nuts. We'd run lug nuts over and over and over again. Now we run them once and throw them away, leave them on pit road and buy brand new ones. Look at what we go through now. We get brand new rims halfway through the season. We'd run them rims for years. So when you step back and look, yeah, Alan, when you bought a bag of ice to cool the motor down to qualify, dude, you better have counted out exactly how many bags you needed to get that thing cool, because he would get mad if he spent an extra $5 on a bag of ice, it was going to be your butt. You know, now we buy 20, 30 bags of ice, and half the time 10 of it at $20 a pop gets thrown away.
If my research is correct, a few years later you ended up taking some time away from NASCAR. You went to work with your brother, I believe.
Yep.
You came back, you ended up at Hendrick Motorsports. Was the pre-existing relationship you had with Ray Evernham kind of the launching pad for how you ended up over there? Yeah,
it was still good. And I went to work for Bill Elliott, and I worked for Bill. So I stayed in touch with Ray and them, and but yeah, to get back into Hendricks, that's where it came from. I got the phone call from Ray and blah blah blah, and so yeah, it all just came back together. But the relationship we had built at Allen's, you know, and they were, like I went back and tell you, Ray was one of the guys that he was really smart. He was an engineer. I knew where this was going, and I learned as much as I could from Ray. He was only there a short time, but I learned from him as much as I can learn. And then when I was fortunate enough to come back, whether Ray realized that, you know what, this kid right here, he wants to be something, he's willing to learn, and he's willing to listen. That got me hired back, I don't know, or my ability to work on cars, I don't know, but when I did come back, I took that opportunity to learn and listen and be better. So I think all that kind of tied in, and that's probably what helped me get my job back with Ray. But and still today we're great friends. Mm-hmm. Every time I see him at the racetrack, we stop, we talk. You know, we just talk about racing, we talk about personal life. But he's still a great friend of mine, and I still look up to Ray a lot.
This may sound like a silly question, but when you look back at that 24 team in the late 90s going into the early 2000s, everybody knows how untouchable they were. So again, this may sound like a silly question, but what made that team and what made Jeff Gordon so good?
Well, Jeff Gordon was, he was the Jimmy Johnson that come around a little later. The ability to adapt. Like I said, our cars were really good. We had great engines at Hendrick Motorsports, great chassis, and Ray was phenomenal with setup stuff. But at the end of the day, those cars didn't drive much better. And having a driver, you can take some of these drivers, and no matter what you put them in, they win. And Jeff was one of those guys. And I think everybody saw that coming, whether it was in these little go-karts and the sprint cars, and when he come into the Busch Series, which is Xfinity now, he was successful. And when Jimmy Johnson, the same way, whether he was riding dirt bikes, he was in stadium trucks, late model cars, whatever, he was successful. He found a way to win. There's only a few of those guys out there. And Jeff Gordon was one of the best. Jeff Gordon, at the time when I worked for him, reminded me of Tim Richmond. That's who I say, this kid right here is the next Tim Richmond. And he was. And he's still one of the best to ever come in here and drive. And I put Jeff Gordon up against anybody. But he was just so focused. Again, he had a goal in mind, he had a focus, and he knew what he needed to do. And he could adapt to any racetrack, any situation. He knew how to race around guys. He knew how to push guys' buttons. I think he was really smart at, everybody tried to build this big rivalry between him and Big E. But at the end of the day, they were great friends. Yeah. But he knew his role. And Jeff Gordon knew his role with Big E, and I think he learned a lot from him, especially on the speedway racing stuff. Jeff wasn't a great speedway racer when he first came there, but you know what? He was a great race car driver, and he could learn, he could adapt, and he learned from Big E how to run on the speedway. Next thing you know, he's winning all these speedway races. Right. So, and when you got a guy like Jeff Gordon who's, he goes to Sonoma. We won like 7 road course races when I was over there in a row. We run Sonoma. We won every time we'd go, we were the guy. We knew going we were going to win a road course race. Well, here's a guy that runs sprint car, dirt car races. He didn't have any background in road course racing. Right. When you got guys like that, that's the difference in the drivers. You're not going to stop Jimmy Johnson from winning championships and races. There may be a little lull here and there, but you're not going to stop him. He's always going to do it. There's only a few of those guys out there that can win multiple championships.
And then, as we mentioned earlier, then you go to a Mark Martin and even a Dale Jr. and Eric Almirola at DEI before coming over here to Stewart-Haas. I'm curious, Tony, and I'm not looking for, obviously no bad mouthing or anything like that, but the end time where before you came to Stewart-Haas at DEI is of course where everything was kind of getting a little dramatic, dramatic. Was that hard just from a company perspective in the sense of trying to stay focused on the goal at hand and taking care of the drivers that you guys had and keeping that company going in a sense? It
did. Like when I first went over there in 2002, crew chief for Steve Park, things were still rolling really good. It was still moving along and things were going. And then, I really didn't pay much attention to the Teresa, Dale Jr. family thing. I just didn't. You heard all the stories and you heard it, but I didn't see it when I was there. I never saw that as a, we would see Teresa and we would see Dale and all, and you just never saw it until it got close to the end. And then, of course, once somebody sees it or hears it and it blows up, then everybody pays attention to it. And I was no different. Yeah. We were there to race and have fun and win races, and I didn't pay much attention to the family side of it. But as it got down to the end, it was a distraction, I think, to all of us, knowing that, if this doesn't get fixed or straightened out, we're probably all going to be in trouble here. And I think what hurts the worst is I went back up there later on, I think it was a year or maybe 2 years ago, where they told the old crew members we could come up there and get our uniforms, our old Bud uniforms and whatever race day uniforms we had. And a few of us that work here, we all worked together up there. We went up there to get our crew uniforms, and then walking back in there and seeing that, it was like, man, what we had going on here was really, really badass. And now, how could this fail, right? What happened? I mean,
it takes you back when you go over there.
Yeah, we went over there, and I looked at Jay Gennari, and I'm like, Jay, what happened? Everything was going so good, and we were just, the outlook and our future was over here was like, man, we got Dale Jr. We got, you know what I mean? We got Michael Waltrip. We got all these cool drivers and a great company. And
winning plate races left and right.
How did it go to this?
Yeah. So speak of some of the good times, though, because you mentioned you worked with Mark Martin, you worked with Dale Jr.
All
the
those
plate
times were
success
awesome.
was great. What are some of the good things that you like to look back on?
Yeah, all that was good. Working with Mark Martin was awesome. And working for Dale Jr., man, that was really, really cool. Tony Jr. and Pops and all those guys. It was like working with Pops and Tony Jr. was a lot like working for like the Sanford & Son, you know, where you had Lamont and then you had the old man. They would just go back and forth and go back and forth and argue and fight and argue and fight. That's what it reminded me of.
But it worked.
But it worked. They were very successful, and it did work because that's the way they communicated. But they loved each other, and hell, they still work together now, you know. And that was a lot of fun, man. Working with Dale Jr. and all the guys up there, and you know, Michael Waltrip and Steve Park, Richie Gilmore, everybody up there, and it's just, man, we had a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It was redneck racing. If you ever wanted to see what a redneck race shop looked like, you should have walked through those doors because it was some redneck stuff going on up in there. And we just had a blast, man. Dale Jr., when he would come in, you know, he'd come bebopping in and just making fun, poking at everybody and stirring everybody up, and it was just fun. It was a ton of life, man, and it was just, you loved to go to work there. You went to work there because you loved working with the people there, the atmosphere. It was just a lot of fun, and I had a blast. I wouldn't trade it for anything. I'd still be there if they hadn't closed it down. You know, I tell somebody, you know, Alan doesn't die, I would have still been there, and you know, and if the deal at DEI hadn't shut down, I'd still be there. So you know, it's there was more good times than bad.
Right, and of course it's good times here. Would you say, Tony, that kind of like the secret sauce, I guess, to Stewart-Haas Racing is everybody's just a racer here? Yeah,
that's it. Like I told you earlier, man, like Tony Stewart is old school racer, and this place is crew chief driven. He wants the crew chiefs to have hands-on, have a decision, have a voice, but also know that if you want to run this, it's available to you. If however you want to mix your pie up and however make it whatever. If you want to use salt instead of sugar, you can do that. And they still, you know, they still preach that today. But you also have to do a lot of things alike too. We know that. But this place is a blast, man. We have a really good time. I'm glad I'm not crammed in the office all day long, and I don't have to do that. I'd never survive it. But you know, Stewart will come by. Hell, Stewart's riding bicycles now. He's got one of those little road bikes, so he's been showing up and riding with all the guys on their lunch trip up and down the road. So
I believe everybody on Twitter thought it was photoshopped, but it's real.
No, it's real. I didn't think it'd last over maybe 15 minutes into the first ride, but he's actually doing really good with it. And I know Johnny, my engineer, and a bunch of, I mean, pretty much everybody here. It looks like a Tour de France down there in the bathroom. Everybody's got bikes hanging up, but it's man, he is taken to it. But to come in and ride with the guys that work in your company, how great is that, right? I mean, how many guys get to ride bicycles with Tony Stewart at lunch? Not too many. So that's really, really cool that, you know, we have that kind of relationship, you know, with our boss, you know, and hell, he goes camping, four-wheeling with us all the time. You know, the last 5 years he's been at Thanksgiving with us, four-wheeling and camping. So he's the kind of guy you can go and do those things with, and that makes you want to come in here and work because that family atmosphere is tremendous around here, and it's fun, man. It's a lot of fun, and like I say, Hart makes fun of me for getting excited and when somebody wins, but I feel like it's like, you know, it's like you got 4 kids, and you know, when one of your kids scores a touchdown, you know, you hoop and holler if the next day the other one's at ballet and they win a medal at ballet. It's like, who cares which one wins as long as they win and they're happy, and that's the way I am. I just want to see them all win, be happy, and that's why I love working here. You can do that here.
All right, so we're finishing up with Tony Gibson. We've covered, you've been everywhere, you've worked with everyone. After you won the Daytona 500, I was reading some things online, and you had talked, I believe it was to ESPN, just about a lot of things you've, of course, collected through the years, and whether it's trophies or memorabilia or stuff like that. I believe it was even mentioned you have a famous race car stashed away somewhere. What are some of the things that you?
Yeah, I actually, it's funny because you say that, and I know there was a guy a long time ago that said that he had the Underberg car, that Alan drove. And I'm like, hell, that's funny, because I got the nose and the hood off of it, at my house. I made a deal out of it, a cooler thing out of it, I don't keep a lot of the die-cast stuff and all that. I do, Rick Hendrick was really good about, giving us rings for every race we won, no matter where it was, and we'd get a special die-cast. They'd give each guy one die-cast. I have a lot of that stuff in my attic, a lot of photos, things like that, but champagne bottles that blow up in the attic every once in a while that my wife gets mad about. But there's nothing means more than just your memories, of racing with people and your friends and going back and just reminiscing over. I see Rick Mass at the racetrack all the time, and we sit down and talk. We talked at Martinsville down there, and we're great friends, and we talked about old time racing, old school racing, and the fun stuff we had at these guys don't. The first cambered rear end housing Harry Gant had in a 33 car at Martinsville up there, and
wow,
and everybody had these big housings. Well, we weren't smart enough to know the axles were going to tear the drive plates out of it. So, Harry was leading, and he broke a drive plate, and he fell out. We took the lead with Alan. We thought we were going to win it, and we broke a drive plate next. There was 4 guys that took the lead and broke drive plates right after one another. And we were just talking about, we didn't have any money, and we weren't smart enough to know that stuff. You couldn't run it that aggressive. The materials weren't that good, and blah, blah, blah. And we talk about how far the sport has come with those. Now we can run axles for almost a half a season, and we got more camber than we were running there in it, and it's just how did we ever, man, if we could be as smart back then as we are right now about this stuff, we'd be freaking millionaires,
Oh my goodness.
But it's just the memories mean more to me than any one thing. I mean, the trophies are cool, rings are really nice, because that's something that you can look at, put your hands on it, and you know what, I earned that, and I remember the day I got that. Daytona 500 will be no different. I got that ring that they handed me in Victory Lane that night, and my wife being there, and those things I will never, ever, talking to my dad on the phone afterwards, those things right there, the memories are logged in here. They mean more than anything that I could ever hold.
Right. And I wouldn't be doing my due diligence if I didn't ask. You have talked about wanting to come off the road soon.
Mm-hmm.
How have those conversations gone anywhere in terms of if you'll be able to do that in the near future?
Well, they understand here at Stewart-Haas that's what I want to do eventually, and whether it's next year or whatever, I don't know. But yeah, they're aware of that, and they want to make that happen. They understand that I've been doing it a very long time, and I just I'm wore out. Man, I got a grandbaby now, and I want to spend time with him, and while my health is still pretty decent, do some things. But I don't want to get out of it either. I still want to be a huge asset to the company, and I want to be that motivator. I want to be that cheerleader, and I want to be that guy that helps everybody win. But it doesn't. I'm never going to make them have to make a choice. I got to know today or whatever, or this year if their driver lineup ends up being where I need to do it another year or 2 years, then that's what I'll do.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a set time. But I do want to. That's my goal, is to be able to spend more time at home and less time at the racetrack.
Absolutely. So I'll finish with this, Tony. This episode will most likely come out next week, where we go to Homestead. Kevin has qualified, of course, for the Championship 4. Tony Stewart is very pumped up and has said that his competitors will have something to be worried about.
Yeah.
How do you, it's a week away as we record this, but how are you looking at Homestead in terms of course you want to finish strong with 41 team, but when it comes down to Stewart-Haas being able to go out win another championship, what are you expecting for Homestead?
Yeah, I expect Kevin Harvick, I've told everybody, and I've told Harvick this, I told him a month ago, I said, dude, if you get into that Final Four, I said, it's yours. Once he gets in, it's kind of like that fox. If he gets through all those gates and gets into that hen house, it's over. It's game over. And I strongly feel that way. And you can ask him. I've told him that for a long time. If you get in, you'll win it. And our goal is to win. Don't get me wrong, the 41 to win. But the big goal is that 4-car to win that championship. So, if he has to win it to get in and we're leading, then we need to finish second. If it doesn't make a difference, then we want to win it, and he finished the seconds, and we win the race and the championship, would be nothing greater to me.
Absolutely.
But
another championship for SHR is.
You have to look at it that way. Don't get me wrong. I want to win with the 41 more than anybody. We go every week to win. We proved that last weekend, and we'll bring the best race cars that we can do and put ourselves in position to win. But we're not going to do anything that's going to hurt that 4 from taking a championship. Because when you win championships, you win the respect of everybody, all these other companies, and sponsors want to be here, and people want to be here, and it keeps families, together and fed, and it's what we thrive off of. So yeah, it's all right now. Everything is about what can we do to help the 4-car win this championship.
Absolutely. Well, Tony, you've given me more than enough time. I greatly appreciate it.
No problem.